In 1985, a gathering of officials drew nearer rancher Patrick to enlighten him regarding a misfortune in the family. Patrick's sibling sister by marriage and more youthful niece are all dead. The main survivor is his more established niece Jane, who was tracked down in an edge of the house canvassed in blood with a shaver in her grasp. 25 years after the fact, Jane is a picture taker, represent considerable authority in deserted houses. After the misfortune, she was embraced by a cultivate home. However, she likewise got no memory of her life as a youngster. Her family are what happened that dreadful day. She's presently hitched to Alan, and together they have a girl called Alice, despite the fact that Jane's relationship with them is very stressed, since she has memory slips by that make her fail to remember things like gatherings or getting Alice from school one evening, while at the same time searching for new houses to photo with Alice. Jane comes across her experience growing up home. She doesn't remember it, however she's still extraordinarily interested by it and takes a lot of pictures while her mother works. Alice finds a jack on the ground and talks with its secretive proprietor, who shouldn't be visible. Later at home, Jane calls the region accomplices and requests the property records for this farmhouse. It's late in the night when somebody rings the ringer. Furthermore, Jane finds they've left the case at the entryway. Inside there's the jack Alice had found and a bug that takes Jane back a couple of days after the fact. Jane proceeds to be fixated on the most recent farmhouse she's seen and can't quit gazing at the picture she took in the wake of printing it. This makes her disregard getting Alice at school until Alan calls her to remind her, inciting Jane to take the street in a rush. While driving, she gets a call from a little kid's voice that she believes is Alice, telling Jane she needs you to return. At that point, a blonde young lady shows up in the center of the road. What's more, as Jane falls into another memory slip by, she unintentionally crashes her vehicle. The final thing she hears prior to passing out is she maintains that you should return once more in a little while. Jane awakens in the emergency clinic yet can't recollect who Alan and Alice are. The specialist takes Alan to his office to make sense of the issue. The mishap has disturbed a serious, more seasoned injury that has aggravated her amnesia. In the interim, Jane is drawn nearer by Liam, a specialist that will help her work on her memory issues with different activities. She can get her memory back, however it'll take time. A few hours after the fact, Jane hears a clamor outside a room and follows it to find Susie, the blonde young lady she saw on the street. She attempts to reach out with the young lady, however Susie makes tracks. What's more, before Jane can do anything, she's hindered by Alan and Alice, who are leaving for the night. Essentially, this time Jane is beginning to perceive their faces. After certain tests with Liam, Jane hits the hay and glances through a lot of family pictures to attempt to help her memory. A thump on the entryway causes her to get up just to find a container like the one she had figured out at home. This opportunity she views as a little ballet performer inside, along with an image of the farmhouse on the other side of the photo. Somebody composed down the date of the misfortune, sending Jane into a breakdown. In the interim at home, Alan additionally hears the chime ring and finds an envelope with some significant desk work outside. The following day, Alan carries those papers to Jane with some large news: the farmhouse has a place with her. Furthermore, her uncle Patrick has been taking care, all things considered. This time Jane doesn't indeed even mention this administrative work, or on the other hand having an uncle. However, she sees this as an open door, and Liam concurs that a visit might help her push out those old not entirely settled to get more familiar with her past. Jane calls Patrick, who is stunned to hear from Jane yet guarantees to invite her whenever she needs to come. By a couple of days after the fact, the entire family goes to visit Patrick, and Jane makes sure to disregard the vision she has of Susie showing up out and about. Patrick apologizes to Jane for having sent her to child care. However, he could never have made a decent dad, and he believed her should have a decent life. After he gives her the key to the farmhouse, Jane asks what occurred to her family, and Patrick makes sense of they kicked the bucket inside the house without adding any subtleties. While Jane is appreciative for his Assist she with stilling can't recollect him. A short time later the family goes to the farmhouse, which makes Jane incredibly anxious. She leaves the structure through the indirect access to get some air just to hear a peculiar commotion, and when she follows it to the center of the field she finds a red inflatable holding a key and a bid note inviting her home. In the interim Alice investigate the house and finds Jane's experience growing up room. There's another room having a place with Jane's sister, and Alan needs to find the secret key to open it. Inside they find an old music box that Alice can't open and a couple other toys. On out Alan fails to remember the key inside and the entryway gets locked again on its own. The next day the family goes to investigate the closest town. Jane visits a second-hand shop store where Representative Jennifer inconspicuously directs her to an outlined paper page from 1985 containing an article about the misfortune that infers Jane might have been mindful. At that second Jane gets a call from Liam. Since they should have an arrangement today, Liam's pleased to hear she's chipping away at her recollections, yet he additionally swears he's at his office, which goes against the reality. Jane can now see him in the store. After they hang up, Jane follows Liam out of the structure and into the feed bundle labyrinth, where she gets lost and starts getting frantic with nervousness. In the end she surrenders and leaves the labyrinth by breaking one of its walls. Then Jane surges back to her vehicle, where she tracks down another little box hanging tight for her. At first she attempts to disregard it, yet interest gets the better at any rate of her and makes her open it. Inside the container Jane tracks down a portion of an image where she can see her more youthful self, her mother with a foggy face, and Susie, who ends up being her sister later at home. Jane's resting is interfered with by Alice, who requests that she hush up on the grounds that they'll hear her. Befuddled, Jane follows Alice to Susie's room, where she sees a memory of her mom giving her sister the music box unexpectedly. Her girl says Alice isn't actually there now, and the apparitions of her mom and Susie turn towards Jane, who sees Susie has a device in her hands. Frightened, Jane runs off to her old room, where she sees her more youthful self and finds a shaver in her grasp. Showing up all of a sudden, frantic and apprehensive, Jane gets back to the fundamental space to attempt to wake Alan up, yet he stays unconscious while Susie creeps out from the finish of the bed, saying Jane has come to track down them. Jane races to conceal in the storeroom, however Susie finds her there excessively. After bunches of battling, Susie winds up on the floor with Jane's hands on her, and the occasion Jane squints. She regards herself as in Alice's room with her hands around her girl. Fortunately Alice awakens and shakes her mother totally insane lapse, previously sending her back to her own room, where Jane doesn't see Susie any longer, however does track down a jack on the floor. The following day Jane goes to see Patrick to request answers. Patrick makes sense of his sibling had been an alcoholic with somewhat of an attitude, yet he tried sincerely and never hurt his loved ones. Furthermore, tragically, the main individual that understands what happened the day of the misfortune is Jane herself. Later during breakfast, Alice sees Jane is drained. What's more, says she's sorry Susie kept her up the previous evening, yet before Jane can ask her what she implies, Alan comes over and Jane requests that he take Alice to the lake. She thinks the house is causing her to feel more awful, so she needs to return home. Later Alice gets her desire once Alan and Alice are gone. Jane goes to Susie's room, opening it with the key that accompanied a expand. Subsequent to searching for some time, she sees Susie through the window entering the old outbuilding and chooses to follow her. In the old horse shelter, Jane finds their old sheet post, which has a case with different articles including Susie's asthma medication, a Swiss blade, and a minimal key Jane takes with her out of nowhere. Susie seems to tell Jane she shouldn't be there, she ought to stow away, on the grounds that the beast is coming. Then Susie guides Jane inside the post and tells her to run. Jane does as such until she moves the sheets to the side and thinks of herself as in the center of the field. On the ground there's an open box with an old shaver. In the meantime, Alice tells Alan of some bizarre dreams she's had. An old woman told her Jane might hurt her, however Alice doesn't accept it since she knows the genuine Risk is the beast in the room. And not many hours after the fact, the family starts pressing their things, ignorant that Liam is watching from a remote place. Jane can't stop taking a gander at the old picture just to be hindered when she hears Alice running close to the old stable. When she follows her there, Jane figures out it's really Susie, who tells her they can't let her leave. Out of nowhere, the genuine Alice shows up behind her, and Jane's so restless and terrified that she unwittingly puts her hands around Alice. Luckily, Alan appears before she can do anything idiotic, and while Alice runs back to the house, Alan starts shouting at Jane for harming their little girl. As they follow her out, to their shock they track down the Swiss blade from the animal dwelling place, caught in one of the vehicle wheels, which is presently level. Jane swears she didn't do it, and their contention is hindered at the point when Alice out of nowhere starts hollering inside the house requesting help. When her folks contact her, she made sense of she had been pursued by a man that she calls the Beast under the bed. Then she starts to have an asthma assault. This is whenever it first works out. However, Jane remembers it in light of the fact that Susie used to go through a similar. Alan gets Alice and Serge's first floor just to see as the front entryway locked. Jane recalls Susie's words, also ventures back, which right away opens the entryway in light of the fact that the apparitions just need her to rem. While Alan asks a passing vehicle for help to take Alice to the clinic, Jane investigates the house searching for replies. Furthermore, finds a little piece of paper saying label you or it. When Jane acknowledges to play, Susie appears and directs her to a room where Jane opens the music box with somewhat key from the animal dwelling place. Inside she finds two ballet performers like the one she got in the crate, and the other portion of the image which uncovers Liam as Jane's father. Before she can handle the significance of this, Susie makes Jane stow away with her under the bed on the grounds that the Beast is coming, and at that point Patrick enters the room bringing gifts for Susie inside those equivalent little boxes. Jane runs out of the room terrified of what comes straight away, yet Liam appears and makes her visit so she can at last comprehend. It ends up Patrick is the Beast. At whatever point he kept an eye on young ladies, he would come to Susie's room and exploit her. The evening of the misfortune, youthful Jane had been concealing under Susie's bed and needed to see it. Every one of their folks came home sooner than anticipated, and Liam quickly nodded off on the sofa. Their mom, who ended up being Jennifer, heard Susie's endeavors at requesting help and went higher up with the apparatus close by. When Patrick saw her, he battled her for the instrument and wound up killing her, dropping her on the floor so that Jane might be able to see what is happening. Set off one of Susie's asthma assaults, however. Rather than aiding her, Patrick went after youthful Jane, who had enough and was attempting to escape. While the commotions at long last awakened Liam, youthful Jane stowed away in the washroom and got the shaver, so at the point when Patrick drew nearer she hurt him with it prior to taking off again. On her way first floor, Jane found Liam causing them both to fall and raise a ruckus around town floor. The rough arrival immediately killed Liam and hurt Jane's head. Making sense of the amnesia in the wake of seeing his sibling dead, Patrick went to beware of Susie, yet it was past the point of no return for her as well. The asthma assault killed her. To try not to cause problems, Patrick snatched the apparatus and put it in Liam's grasp. Prior to leaving soon after, Jane woke up in the shock of seeing her dead father made her so terrified that she ran to conceal in the corner where the police tracked down her later. Back in the present, Liam makes sense of he didn't tell Jane these things straightforwardly on the grounds that he really wanted her to be here to liberate the Phantom. In tears, Jane apologizes to her family, who vanish when Alan at long last returns. He makes sense of Alice's better and he left her with Patrick, which makes Jane stress for the security of her little girl and power the vehicle to move with a punctured tire. In the interim, Patrick is beginning to talk improperly to Alice, making her guarantee she won't enlighten anybody regarding the game he'll show her, and inadvertently calling her Susie. When he hears Alan and Jane show up, he snatches a gun and takes Alice to the animal dwelling place, shooting when Alan attempts to draw nearer. Since Patrick's eyes are on Alan, Jane will approach him from behind without him seeing, and she takes him out with a digging tool. Minutes later, Patrick awakens in Susie's room with his options limited and Jane leaves him Therewith the entryway lock so the phantoms can at last have their vengeance now that her recollections are back. Jane has no issues with visiting her family's grave where she passes on the old picture to close this part of her past and begin a superior an existence with Alan and Alice. In the interim, in the old farmhouse, no one can hear Patrick's shouts requesting help. Try to buy in and turn on warnings so you can observe more recordings like this. Gratitude for observing.